Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. This is the Transport Advisory Group meeting. I'll ask Chris to do the housekeeping, if you like.
Thank you, Chair. Just some notes before we kick off. Please note that this meeting is being audio recorded by the Council for the purposes of recording on the Council website in due course. Please could I therefore remind councillors and officers to use their microphones when speaking. This meeting may also be audio recorded and or filmed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although the Chairman has ultimate discretion and may halt any recording or broadcast should he feel that it is disrupting proceedings. Please note that this meeting room is fitted with an induction loop for the benefit of hearing aid users. Hearing aids should be switched to the T setting. There are no scheduled fire alarm tests this evening. Therefore, should the alarm constantly ring, please do follow officers out of the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. If you should need any specialist assistance, please do let a member of staff know so that we can arrange for this to happen. Should you need to make use of them, toilets are just out of this door and to the right and are clearly marked on the right-hand side of the corridor. Please be aware that only those who have registered to speak may do so, and so we ask all attendees to avoid disrupting today's proceedings should it arise. And finally, please could all mobile phones be turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. Apologies this evening from councillors Nigel Brooks, councillor Nick Geary, councillor Mike Green, which then takes us on to substitute members. Councillor Tony O'Neill is substituting for councillor Mike Green.
Lovely, okay. And we have no Tony Trent either, so assuming his apologies.
Not received.
Okay. Lovely, thank you. Any declarations of interest? I have one just for clarity, which is that on item 6 that I have been to see the path in question and talk to the householder.
Thank you, Chair. On item 8B, a couple of roads are actually within my ward, but I've not been to the sites nor had any engagement with residents there.
On item 6, I went and visited residents in number 24 James's Road, 104 Sheringham Road and 53 Wroxham Road.
Okay, confirmation of minutes. The minutes last time were quite long because it was our first meeting and it was an opportunity really to get everyone to the same place, so hopefully useful though. Can I first ask any items corrections? So perhaps we just run through fairly quickly. Page 1, 2. I hate doing this. Has anyone got any issues with any of the minutes? No. Okay. We take those as read now. Thank you. So, public issues, we're on to.
Okay, Chairman. This evening, public issues, we have received one question and 3 statements, plus there are also speakers on some of the items. Perhaps starting with a question, could we welcome Vicky Moss to the podium at the front, please?
I think the question, I have a copy of it online, but it was...
If you're happy for me to do so, I'm happy to read out the question and it can then be responded to. So the question from Mrs. Moss is the Camphor Cliffs ward included in the local walking and cycling improvement plan that is currently being developed?
Thank you. Julian, are you,
Good evening, Chair. Martin Baker, Road Safety Manager at BCP. Can you hear me? The answer has been produced by our cycling and walking officer. He's produced a plan showing the routes across the area, which hopefully Chris has got some copies of he can circulate. But for the record, for the audio, there is a strategic cycling network, which is a top tier of cycling routes. They're shown in green on the plan. Hopefully you got a coloured copy of the plan. And they're currently being audited and assessed for potential improvements. Stakeholders will be invited to comment and suggest improvements of their own, and all schemes will be costed and prioritised into a long-term investment plan programme. And this is part of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. Secondary cycling routes and local access routes will be reviewed in the future. These haven't been developed yet because the process for developing proposals is very resource intensive. That's cycling. In terms of walking, there are 3 core walking zones comprised of top tier of walking routes, 1 for each of the main town centres. The western edge of the Bournemouth core walking zone is shown as a solid black line on the plan, and with a 2-kilometre buffer zone shown on the dash line. The 2-kilometre buffer zone for Poole is shown on the left, and key walking routes between the buffer and the core walking zones are shown in blue. And these are currently being audited and assessed for potential improvements. As with the strategic cycling network, stakeholders will be invited to comment and suggest improvements of their own. All schemes will be costed and prioritised in the LSWIP. Other lower tier CWZs will be reviewed in the future, including the local centre on Haven Road. It's necessary to break down the CWZs into different tiers because, as again, the process for developing these is resource intensive.
Thank you. So in summary, we're working on it. Yes, it does include
And there are
the Camphor Cliffs area. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the statements. Mrs. Moss, are you happy for me to read your statement? Okay. The Camphor Cliffs ward within the BCP area is particularly strategically located, and the network of footpaths, bridleways and cycle routes that lead from the more intensively populated areas of Branxton, Park Zone, Pen Hill and Westbourne to the beaches are currently underutilised due to inaccessibility caused by lack of safe pedestrian routes across roads with high volume and high speed traffic, lack of signage for footpaths, lack of traffic calming and speed enforcement, flooding on footpaths caused by runoff from development, and lack of public transport around apartments in high concentrations of over 65 years, and inaccessible pedestrian routes to and from Branxton Station and Pen Hill due to the above. This leads to reliance on car usage in and around this area, which is in turn leading to congestion, pollution, unhealthy lifestyles and social isolation. Moving on to the next statement, which is from Jerry Mogg even. My family have lived at 22 James Road for 5 years. This is not a truthful application with any recent use and is not supported by the majority of James Road residents. There is a private right-of-way at the James Road section which we wish to remain for access only. I have never seen anyone transit the route of this application. We already have serious security issues in the area, and this would only exacerbate the situation, giving an unlit thoroughfare to and from James Road. This adds no benefit whatsoever to the residents of James Road. Finally, a statement from Margaret Kay. I live at 47 Roxham Road, corner of Sheringham Road, directly opposite the proposed footpath. I don't understand why the council wish to open a footpath that has not been used to my knowledge for at least 20 years, according to local residents. My reasons for objecting are as follows. It only leads to a road that is a cul-de-sac, is therefore of no benefit to anyone, and B, it invites antisocial behaviour, and as crime in the area is on the rise, it seems a detrimental step in trying to keep the area safe.
Okay, thank you. So on to item 6, which is James Road. We have 4 people, I think, wanting to speak on this. We have 5 minutes for those people wanting to speak in support of the application, and 5 minutes for those objecting to it. So I guess first we start with the officer, perhaps, who would like to introduce the topic and the paper.
Yes, certainly. Good evening, members. Good evening, Chair. So this item pertains to the matter of the application by members of the public to record a public right-of-way extending between Sheringham Road and James Road in Poole. The application arises from the fencing off of the path by 104 Sheringham Road in 2017. Evidence adduced in support of the claim extends from 1957 to 2018, as the evidential test is met of a reasonable allegation that on the balance of probabilities, a public right-of-way has arisen by foot through over 20 years continuous user. The recommendation is that an order is made to record this path as a public footpath.
Okay, thank you. So if we can have those people that were objecting to that first. Mr. Atherton?
Good evening, councillors. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on this application. My name is Michael Atherton and I live at 104 Sheringham Road. The Right-of-Way Department's report on this matter implies that the reasons for its recommendation is statutory inference of dedication. However, Section 31 of the Highways Act 1980 states the public use over land must have been as of right without interruption for 20 years. The 20-year period is calculated retrospectively from when the way was called into question, in this case from April 2017, when I fenced off my boundary, to 1997, and there must be sufficient evidence of the use of the route in full. Now, all the evidence I've submitted on this matter proves that this application does not meet these legal requirements. For example, the mature overgrowth 7-metre high oak tree, which is approximately 30 years old, obstructing the route. The Right-of-Way Department's own report on this matter highlights how it's unclear when the path became impassable due to vegetation. And the main evidence in support of this application refers to Ordnance Survey mapping, referring to a footpath from 1941 onwards. However, OS mapping portrays physical features but expresses no opinion on public or private rights. This is a quote from the Definitive Map Orders Consistency Guidelines from the Planning Inspectorate. There is a private right-of-way which exists over part of the proposed footpath for the benefit of particular property owners only that surround the route, listed on several title deeds on the land registry. This is also highlighted by the Council's own highway adoption map, dated November 2018. Now, the area shaded orange, I was hoping this would be on the screen, is the private footpath described. Notice this does not extend the length of my property. Now, the user evidence form submitted on this matter prompted 6 objections of residents with no knowledge of any path covering a 35-year period and 10 people giving evidence of their usage of a path. However, with the Rights-of-Way Agenda Report, paragraph 6 highlights 6 statements in support claim to use the path up until 2018. However, it's been fenced off since 2017, April 2017, and impassable due to overgrowth for several years. Now, several user evidence forms have questions missed out or the declaration not filled out. The Council's OGADA notes on public right-of-way user evidence forms state all questions must be answered, and several user evidence forms are from the same family and several friends of said family. DMO guidelines recommend it is unlikely use confined to members of a single family and their friends would be sufficient to represent the public. With this in mind, can any of the user evidence forms be trusted? Any analysis to the user evidence forms would question the integrity of the information. The Ramblers Association were a consultee on this matter and conducted a site visit and produced a report in November 2018. This is their conclusion. In normal circumstances, the Ramblers Association would welcome the addition of any right-of-way to the definitive map, but as the circumstances and from what I was able to see on my visit, I don't see the addition of this path as practical, or that its use if provided would be, in my opinion, be very light if it was used at all. Therefore, the Ramblers feel that they're able to either support this application or object to it. Now, the Rights of Way Department have not included this information in their report for this Transport Advisory Group. And the Rights of Way Department have yet to conduct a site visit. I submitted a petition at the September 19 committee on this item signed by 54 residents who object to this application and reside within a 200-metre radius of the proposed route along James Road and Sheringham Road. Only one resident did not sign a petition of all the people who approached. There is insufficient evidence to prove on the balance of probabilities that a right-of-way subsists. This application does not meet the legal requirements. Thank you.
Shall I start again, or? The local residents, as they do not want this open, as it would add to the existing antisocial behaviour in the area. I can clearly see the proposed right-of-way from my property, and I pass it several times a day and have done so since moving there. I also had a close relationship with the previous owner of 104 Sheringham Road, an elderly gentleman who had lived there since 1961 until his death 5 years ago. I can categorically say that I have never seen any use of the proposed right-of-way, nor did the previous owners, as it's always been overgrown and impassable. Having spoken to most of the local residents, it appears that there are only actually two people who would benefit from this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and then could we please have Mr. White?
Sorry, just Okay, my name's John. I live in Wroxham Road. Mrs O'Brien's speaking later on. She lives in James Road. We both live with our families, with young children, in properties running directly along the footpath. We want to make it quite clear this is an application for recognition
of a public footpath and has nothing to do with a boundary dispute. I recognise that you want to listen to people's views. However, I think that the case is clear-cut. Someone has expressed an interest to keep a path open and to register it formally as a public footpath. Plus, they submit evidence that the path has been in continuous use by the public over the past 20 years. Both of these requirements have been met. Our families have been using this path on a continual basis, and 104 Sheringham Road acknowledged this on film to be the case on the day that they put up the barrier. It was when one of our children were on the way up to the neighbour's house and their way was blocked by Mr Atherton erecting a fence across the path. We have video evidence of this, and we are happy to share it with the council if this is helpful. 104 Sheringham Road admitted knowledge of our use actually goes in our favour of the application and is in itself evidencing the use of the path between 2015 and 2017, and also addresses point 11 in your pack. So if this is not about the evidence that this is a footpath, then this is about people buying a property next to a path who then decide to claim sole use for the path for themselves. If it is about that, then please consider they blocked this access to the path without consulting all neighbouring parties. They blocked it against the express will of several parties. That's all evident on the tape. And they have now taken away the wall, we saw in a picture, which separated their private garden from the footpath. And they also stated that if this is established as a footpath, they will take down the barriers. And again, this is evident on tape, which is available should you need it. Ms O'Brien's going to continue from now.
Thank you. That's great.
Thank you for your time, councillors.
Hello. So this objection, the blockage of the footpath isn't just inconveniencing us, it also blocks everyone else's access. It also forces people living in James Road to take a more dangerous way when walking to the two local primary schools, because the alternative route runs along Bourne Valley Road, which is quite an unpleasant and also potentially dangerous road to walk on, especially when walking young and quite excitable children down that road. It also creates a massive detour for residents of James Road to get to the bus stop, which is near the exit of the path, as well as when they want to go to Branksome Recreation Ground or the playground, youth centre, etc. I believe that it's the council's aim to get more people walking. So I imagine by maintaining safer and shorter walkways, this would meet the aim. I heard about the petition for the first time at the last council meeting, so I wanted to understand people's views in regards to the footpath, rather than just my personal views and the views of people that I already knew. And I went to speak to some of those people. I spoke to people that are directly affected by the path, so that live boundaring these properties. So I spoke to 4 parties this Monday evening. Additionally...
Do you wrap up, please? Sorry.
Okay, yeah. Additionally, I'm considering the views of 5 parties whose views we already know, such as Mike's and Jerry's, etc., my own. So 3 parties were strongly against the path, which is Mike, Jerry, and 1 more. 1 doesn't mind either way. 5 were pro the path, including John and I. 2 properties are currently empty and 1 has sold. So this represents all 12 properties who border directly against the path. And what these numbers have shown me is that the petition doesn't actually capture people's wishes, but shows that neighbours were behaving neighbourly and were being supportive and therefore signed a petition. It also shows me that more people would like the path than not.
Thank you. If you could stop now, please.
It was one last bit, if that's the case. I thought it was interesting to read the comments to this article, which was published on the 13th of September in the Echo, because when you show them in the order of ratings, they clearly show an overall support for the footpath. So we recommend that, considering the level of support for the path, the council avoids judicial review and instead follow their usual policy in regards to supporting public footpaths. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request from one of the ward councillors for the area to speak, which, Toby, would you like to?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. I wish to speak in objection to this footpath on behalf of myself, the objectors, as well as my fellow ward councillor Rachel Maidment. Both Councillor Maidment and myself have visited the property and find ourselves astounded that the strip of land that runs past 104 Sheringham Road could be seriously considered as a footpath that has been in continual use for the necessary period of time. For starters, in the application, the applicant has stated they believe the owner of 104 Sheringham Road to be attempting to claim the land through adverse possession. This is clearly untrue, as a matter of simple legal fact, shown by the official documents denoting their plot, they already own the land that this application is referring to. The land registry official copies clearly show this and make no mention of any claim to a right-of-way having existed over this land. Nextly, the land is intraversable. It is obstructed by trees clearly more than 20 years of age, as well as being less than a metre wide and extremely steep and uneven due to the local topography and the effect of the roots of the oak tree that itself block the entire width, even when bare in the winter months, as it is now. Both myself and Councillor Maidment find it impossible to believe that this land has been used as a path for the necessary period of time, and indeed evidence as to this can be found in the fact that the owners of 104 Sheringham Road did not have anyone use their land as a right-of-way in the first 2 years of themselves living in the property. They only blocked it when they found people on their property erecting fence panels at least 2 years after they bought the property, and the confrontations that ensued. The land registry official copies that denote the extent of their land clearly show that they own this land, which they fenced off, and are entirely entitled to do so in law and to dispute any possible right-of-way that is on their property. It is suggested in the report that there is an overhead clearance of 2 to 3 metres and therefore no obstruction to the path. This is based only on an old video, as no officers have actually made a site visit to the property. This video is no longer accurate. I have been to the property and I can assure you that this is not the case. As I have stated, the land is impassable. I certainly would not wish to attempt to make it from one end to the other, let alone any child or member of the public who so clearly apparently want to use this land continually. I would not dispute that the land beyond the borders of 104 Sheringham Road has been used as a right-of-way between the adjoining properties for a long period of time, and therefore the majority of the right-of-way suggested in the application could be considered perfectly reasonable. However, the part that runs through 104 Sheringham Road has clearly not been used for many years, more than long enough to ensure that it does not meet the requirements to be declared a footpath. Members, this is perfectly simple. The path connecting James Road to the rear of 104 Sheringham Road is a well-travelled, well-used private right-of-way which already exists. However, the land within the title of 104 Sheringham Road has clearly not been used for many years and is neither suitable for or meets the requirements necessary to be considered a footpath. Thank you very much.
So if you could just say this a sec. I'm interested because I've read the depositions from all of the parties, and clearly within the deposition from Mr. Atherton there was a land registry which showed the path not in his possession, and then he got that changed. So that actually it's not true that it was always in his possession.
I have seen and inspected the official copies and seen the report compiled for him by a solicitor, fully qualified solicitor. It is an extensive report.
I've read all of his report too.
It clearly shows that the land is within his borders.
Okay, thank you. Before we do that, could I just have a word perhaps from our Rights and Way officer around the adoption of footpaths in the urban area, because it's a process that's current and I think would be relevant for people to hear, if that's possible.
So in terms of adoption of public footpaths, I mean, to address some of the issues which were raised there, I noted that amongst Mr. Atherton, Mr. Hayward and the ward member, they refer quite often to the fact that the path appears to be completely overgrown now, and in recent memory it has become overgrown. And I don't disagree with that. I think that, yeah, you can even see on the video, it is possibly impassable, at least some of the time of the year. But that doesn't say too much about the evidential test there, because we're talking about an expanse of user evidence which extends from 1957 to 2018, and I'm saying that well, who could really predict exactly what the lay of the land would have been at that time? So there isn't a whole lot that we can actually glean in terms of whether rights have arisen just through how the path presents itself physically today. It is entirely whether it meets that test that on the balance of probabilities there's a 20-year period. And I think the difficulty has been that although we're saying that 2017 is the time where we draw the 20-year period back, when exactly did the path actually fall into disuse? Because it is very overgrown, but that is such a long period of time that there must be 20 years in there somewhere, which would absolutely give rise to a public right of way, in my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies for being slightly late. Like some raving lunatic, I turned up at Bournemouth Town Hall. I didn't read the top of my page. Anyway, I'm one of three members around the table that have visited the site. I don't know whether anyone else had the opportunity to. And I have to say that when I looked at it, I was absolutely certain that there's no way that that has been used in recent times. And I would say significant recent times, because there is a tree growing in the middle of it. There's lots of other shrubs growing in the middle of it. The width of it is very narrow anyway. And, you know, it's walled one side, fenced the other side. So it's not like anything's been knocked down and, you know. So as far as I'm concerned, I completely go along with what some people have said, that it's not been used for some considerable time. And there isn't anything to suggest that it has been. My view is that this shouldn't be confirmed as a public right of way, and if it was, then the only way that it could be done reasonably would be for that strip of land to be purchased from 104, and for it to be cleared and turned into a footpath, and then I doubt whether it would be used a great deal, and it would be a very narrow footpath. So I personally go along with not accepting this as a footpath, and it'll be interesting to hear from anyone else who has actually had a look at it.
I have a few questions. There was mention that the addition of this path would not be useful in any way. Can you, as a rights of way officer, just give some input into that comment?
As to whether the path would be useful, I mean, I think that it would have a use because it connects James Road to Sheringham Road, and someone walking between James Road and Sheringham Road would otherwise, through the use of the path, would otherwise be disabused of having to walk all the way around to see a neighbour, for example. So I think there is some use for it, although I think that the reasonable use of it is pretty much related to the most local residents. I don't think that the public at large are likely to use this path. It is, you know, going to be trafficked not very often, I don't think.
So you're suggesting that it would have a use, at least, I suppose, which is different from what the Amblers Association was saying. The other question was about antisocial behaviour. Do you have any experience of whether this is likely to cause antisocial behaviour, or whether actually this could help with, or like whether that is a real concern or not?
opening of the path would have in terms of, crime, and otherwise if it was not wanted, because the legal test is very narrow in that if you're recording the path, it simply has to meet that evidential test that it's coming into being. We're not really afforded any opinion as to whether or not it's suitable. So, yeah, it's difficult.
Sorry, can I just, on that, we did hear from Mrs O'Brien some of the reasons why it might be useful in terms of the link to the school, the bus stop and Branksome Rec, because James Road itself is actually a steep road going down to in the other direction, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there are uses for the path, I imagine, yeah. It increases pedestrian permeability. Yeah, so without it, you would have a longer route to schools, bus stops and recreation grounds. So I haven't necessarily measured exactly how much this would be, but if residents are saying that they would find it to be more convenient, then that is their evidence and we have to take that into consideration.
I had one other question about the ownership of land. Can you just clarify about, so it is possible for the owners of 104 to own that land, but there's still to be a public right of way, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. So there's no real bearing on the status of a public right of way as to what the land ownership is.
Councillor Howe.
Yeah, when you say question.
Probably should have been questions first, actually. All right, but yes, do that.
Yeah, the ownership of the land is irrelevant. It's the whole point of a right of way. It's a right of way over somebody else's land. So it makes no, it's of no relevance. I've visited the site today and tried to get from the top end, and I noticed there's no signage. So it's not surprising many people can find it, and nobody would walk down there at the moment if they didn't know and be quite confident that there's a right of way there. But as soon as you get onto the right of way, it's initially quite wide at the top, and then number 24 have blocked it off. And I tried to get through it, and I got through, pulled their fence back and went, well, not their fence, and the fence that they'd illegally put there, probably. And you can see on the right-hand side, very substantial concrete pillars that once obviously held a fence that are no longer there. Perhaps, and I've supplied a picture today, which I've just sent to you, which maybe the fence panels arranged in a way that clearly stops people getting through. So obviously nobody's been using it in the last 3 years or forever how long. It has been impassable. We've got to look at this over a 20-year period, or what I assume. So I'd just like clarification that we are here to decide whether we feel this is a useful right of way, not to determine the legal position of the right of way. Is that right?
No, it's the opposite.
Is it the opposite?
Yeah.
So this is a judicial. I wasn't aware this was a judicial committee capable of deciding.
So this is an advisory committee to Cabinet, so we are here to hear, and we've heard from a number of people, both in support and against the change. We need to recommend to Cabinet for the officers to pursue the order.
So this issue about it being, does it exist or does it not in practice over usage over a number of years, that I would have thought was a matter for the courts to determine. I would have thought what we are deciding here is whether there is enough evidence in our view to make an application to put it on the definitive map.
Yeah, that's essentially correct. Yeah, so all we're actually assessing is a reasonable allegation. It's not necessarily us having to prove that a public right of way has arisen. It's just a reasonable allegation. is sufficient to make the order. But we are capable as an authority of confirming the order for ourselves if nobody objects to it. So it is upon confirmation of the order that the public right-of-way comes into being.
So the claimed for and against is an Annex E, on page 22 of the report. Does actually highlight the years of use claimed and not claimed, as it were.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I ask the question through the Chair that many of those speaking have claimed that no site visit has been done by the Rights of Way team. Is that actually the case? And if so, why not?
Not true. We have visited the site twice. I admit I only popped my head over the fence to glean what was going on there. Completely overgrown path. I can completely confirm Mr. Atherton's observations there. And for whatever shortfall that I had from not being able to see his garden in person, I was using the videos which Mr. Atherton kindly provided to me, which was a full video survey of the entire path. So I felt satisfied by having looked over the fence and seen the videos that I could determine as to what the lay of the land is in terms of the situation of the path.
If I may, Chair. The video itself is very interesting, and what draws my attention I'll come on to. But I've got an example of this myself in that with my in-laws who live in Bricket Wood, there's a very similar path which has been well used. But essentially what's happened over the years which I've been visited, which is over a decade, I've used that to walk my dog each time I visited, and I normally visit 3 times a year. And what happens is that the fences fall into disrepair, they move in, we have spring growth, some of the residents may cut back, etc. And it is a remarkable similarity to a path which I've used in a different part of the country entirely, 3 times a year to walk my dog over 10 years. My concern here is that when a footpath or a right-of-way is established, then it always remains a right-of-way. And I think the courts normally find that. But this is, I'm not legally trained. But what I do draw, what catches my attention time and time again, is in the packs on page 17, 18 and 19, is that my question is to the officer that on OS map 1941 to 1950, on OS map 1951 to 1960, and OS map 1961 to 1980, does the term FP indicate that it's a footpath?
I believe it only indicates that the Ordnance Survey have identified a structure which would appear to them to be a footpath. It has absolutely no legal bearing on the status of the path whatsoever.
So if I may ask a question then, we have in the rural area, obviously the confirmation of footpaths has gone back some distance, but in the urban area we have quite a lot of paths that haven't yet been formally adopted, and certainly in the Old Town there was a survey done by Society of Poole to confirm those and to bring them to our attention to get them adopted, which has happened. But this is one of a number of other paths which have effectively have not been adopted just because we're in the urban area and into an exclusion zone. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, it's true. We did survey it, I believe. Essentially, because there's just so many of the paths, we've had to enter into some kind of prioritisation. I decided to deprioritise this one. I have known about it for quite some years, quite simply because I predicted that it would open quite a significant can of worms, which would end up slowing down the rest of the process. So this is something which has been deliberately saved until the end of that process. So we can get more of the other paths saved, essentially. So that's why it's been left.
Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, looking at the maps that indicate footpath, as Councillor Farquhar said, from 1941 to sometime at least up to 1980 and not beyond, if not beyond. And the video we saw and the picture in front of me now, page 21, Appendix D, is very clear there has been a footpath, certainly within the last 10 years, because it wouldn't be, the land wouldn't lay the way it is in that picture or in the video. So I'm fairly convinced that it has been a footpath, and it has been a footpath for a long time, and it's only since it's been obstructed that it's fallen into total disuse.
Anybody else?
Comments?
Yeah, just in general, agreement with what Councillor Howell has just said, and I can see quite a lot of uses for it for the residents of James's Road, and given the climate emergency, just a need to protect footpaths so that we can continue to encourage people to walk and be able to access transportation other than using private car.
Thank you. Councillor Trent.
Yes, Chairman, I'm sort of... the footpath was blocked off in 2017. There's absolutely no way the oak tree and other plants on the route of that footpath would have grown up in the last 3 years or less than 3 years. That has been impassable for a lot longer. The point made about crime and antisocial behaviour, in the area that I traditionally represented before, I've also included this area. We've had several footpaths that have been closed off by the Housing Committee or whoever because they were being used precisely for what people are worried about in James Road, that people get up to antisocial behaviour, they've got somewhere to escape. And that, I think, is something that has to be borne in mind, that albeit that if this was declared a footpath, it still wouldn't be passable. There would have to be trees taken down and all sorts to make it passable, which is why I say that that if it was declared a footpath, the council should purchase it and sort it out and so on. And I don't think that's actually a particularly good use of money at the moment. You know, I continue to say that the evidence of my eyes and limited understanding of arboriculture and so on is that there's absolutely no way that's been used recently, and I think it is, whereas I think the footpath officer said opening a can of worms, and I think it actually opens up a whole lot of potential for antisocial behaviour. Certainly, this has caused major problems in other parts of the area that I've represented for a long time, and we would actually be creating a problem there that even some of those that claim to support it would probably end up not supporting it because of what has happened in that kind of environment. So, so personally, I would not go along with opening it up as a footpath, and I think that we should turn it down.
Councillor Howe.
Could we just have clarifying? So I'm sure the officer said we couldn't take the crime element into consideration. I mean, I'm looking at the police crime map here of the area, and it doesn't look as... There are some instances, but maybe it's because I live in the town centre. It looks it looks relatively okay. But was that true that we shouldn't be taking into consideration crime issues in making this decision?
It is correct that we can't consider crime in terms of the evidential test. We won't be able to say we're refusing to make an order because we believe that the path would be a crime generator. It is a germane consideration in any case because, as Councillor Trent points out, that you can use a public spaces protection order to potentially gate off the path if it was found that the path, once opened and recorded, became a crime generator. Now, that is a bit of an elongated process. It's something we'd have to involve the police in, and there'd have to be an actual recorded pattern of crime there in order to start that process. But it is at least possible to, yes, gate off public rights of way if they become crime generators.
Yeah, but I think you're saying were the police asked if they had an opinion on this?
Were the police asked if they had an opinion on the application? No.
So if I might, I read through all of the depositions, both for and against this, and they go back quite a long way. And as it says, I think in paragraph 8, there was a couple of shops at the bottom of the path historically, and the usage was quite high. One was a chip shop, one was a corner shop, and it's tailed off. I'm actually a great advocate for some of these links. I think there's far more people conducting crime and hot-footing off in cars than the expectation that people are doing it on foot. Although it's interesting, the statistic that you highlighted. I also do feel that it's actually quite a problem if people are going to be encouraged to apportion land to themselves. And as I said, the land registry didn't actually have this in the ownership of the adjacent property. It got changed by the applicant. So I think that is relevant for me. And we do want to encourage people to walk and cycle to school, particularly to recreation grounds, to places of leisure. And I think, as Councillor Howe said, if I lived in St James Road, I would be very keen to have access at both ends of my road and not have to go the long way around, particularly given the hilly nature of that area.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask another question of the officers. If this footpath was adopted as the right of way, who would be responsible for the maintenance for keeping it open?
We would be charged with the full maintenance of the public right of way.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, what does that actually entail?
Well, for now, I mean, we would have to strip out all of the vegetation, and then we'd have to lay some kind of surface on there to make it passable to foot traffic.
And ongoing?
Oh, yeah. We'd have to adopt it in terms of maintenance ongoing, yeah.
And do we have, sorry, Chair, and do we have our examples of footpaths which have been adopted, and do we have an idea of what those costs are?
I don't have an estimate on exactly what it would cost to bring this into being. Zach, do you remember how much it cost for the Tesco path?
Not off the top of my head.
Oh, okay, sorry, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
that Tesco path, is that actually in Boscombe East and Folkestone Ward?
No, it's the Newtown one.
Oh.
we're told that we would be picking up the maintenance for it, which answers your question. Questions or comments? I have been asked if I could have an indication for your support or otherwise for this, because we do need to be clear with our recommendation to Cabinet. So could I ask for those people who are would like to see this?
Sorry, Councillor, isn't there a chance for a
Okay, yes, I'm sorry. If you'd like to sum up for 1 minute, if I could have Mr. Atherton or Mr. Hayward first.
Sorry, councillors, I just wanted to clarify really that it almost insinuates that I'm doing something unlawful, which I haven't. I basically moved into a property with a strip of land that wasn't used, and it turns out the land belonged to me, and that was from measuring the land from my original deeds from 1931 or what have you. So I haven't actually done anything unlawful, and it's well within my rights as a lawful person to do what I have done. And that was because two separate people were in my garden unannounced. And also, obviously going back to the reasoning behind Mr. Elias's report gives statutory dedication. And just to highlight that is a 20-year period going back from 2017 when it was called into question back to 1997. And clearly over that time, it has not been used. Like Councillor Trent said, you know, a 7 metre high, 8 metre high oak tree does not grow overnight. That's it really. Thank you very much.
Would either Mr. White or Mrs. Brown want to speak? So can you finish, please? If you could finish now, please. Thank you. I'm sorry, would you sit down, please? Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation from the officers is that we look to grant an order for an unprotected footpath as a right of way. I need a proposer for support of that. Councillor Farquhar, could I have a seconder? Councillor Rice. Okay, thank you. Could those that support that please show?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And those that oppose it?
2.
Okay, we'll move on to item 7. So this is the Branksome Park Camphor Cliffs Residents Association road safety petition.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Moss, would you like to? I'm sorry. Could we, Mr. Baker, would you like to talk through the paper first?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is a petition produced by the Branksome Park and Camphor Cliffs Residents Association. It comprises of 2 parts, a paper petition and an online e-petition. The online e-petition received about 80 signatures, the paper petition 184 signatures. This was at the end of 2019. The petition was out for about 3 months. I'm sure the petitioner will go on to explain, but just briefly to say that the petition highlighted 5 issues and identified a total of 42 sites and produced a hazard map, which you got with the report. Things like improving, expanding cycle routes, installing pedestrian crossing points and so on. The hazard map area is about 1.5 miles square and it has experienced accidents. Over the last 10 years, there were 95 accidents, resulting in 124 casualties, of which 18 were serious. Having said that, around 2/3 were car-to-car incidents, and so injury only to car occupants. And around 1/5 of those were possibly speed-related, according to the police casualty information data. Looking at how the accident records compare with the sites highlighted, around 1/3 of the 42 sites identified have a limited accident history, but none would be at the criteria for intervention. Traffic calming would have a positive impact on road safety, public health, air quality and modal shift, but in purely casualty reduction terms, it's difficult to make a case for improvements here. So the recommendation is that officers work with petitioners to assess potential options to enhance pedestrians and cycle facilities, although at this stage no funding has been identified. And members should also be aware that petitioners have also submitted a bid for SIL funding, and this will be considered along with other bids at the end of next month.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mrs. Moss, would you like to speak?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me to present the highway safety petition, which was put forward by the Branksome Park and Camphor Cliffs Residents Association. I have to say it was signed by 250 people, but the demographic of our ward, heavily concentrated towards the 65-year-old plus age group, meant that many people found the system of the online petition inaccessible because they were either not on the internet. Even people under the age of 65 who were familiar with the use of the internet found finding the petition difficult on your website. So thank you for the comprehensive response to our petition in this agenda. And we do acknowledge that the issues of speeding and road safety go far beyond the area identified on this map and in the Camphor Cliffs ward. Would the councillors please ensure that the presentation of this petition is reviewed by the committee responsible for the SIL funds? We have recently submitted a bid for £1.7 million to address the critical deficiencies in infrastructure highlighted by this petition. It is actually my personal belief that the council have been failing in their statutory duty as the local highways authority to provide basic infrastructure such as safe crossing points at major junctions, right across the area. I set up this petition having talked to people across the area and through personal experience, having witnessed several near misses, elderly people attempting to run across roads in order to get knocked over. My own children cannot walk to the bus stop at Penhill because they have to cross a multi-lane junction, and I counted within a 2-hour period between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. a couple of Thursdays ago, there were 1,584 vehicles going round the junction of Western Road and Leicester Road. I don't think the council appreciate actually how well used these roads are in Branksome Park and Camphor Cliffs by the wider conurbation. I won't go through all the hazard hotspots right now, but this is far better that you see for yourselves the issues that the area face, and I'd be more than happy to arrange a tour. I would say, however, that at each location identified on this map, somebody has reported a near miss with a vehicle, whether they were on foot, bicycle or in the car. These incidents left those victims feeling shaken and lucky they weren't seriously injured or killed. So why does BH13 deserve infrastructure investment? The demographic of the area is amongst the highest rate of over 65s in the whole of the BCP area. The deficiencies in infrastructure resulting from development and the dangerous lack of investment have got to a critical point. People of all ages and levels of mobility are being put at risk on a daily basis as a direct result of the current transport policy and SIL fund allocations, I believe. So what do we want to happen? Ideally, a change in the BCP transport policy using accidents as a measure of risk before investment is made means really that somebody, in effect, if they get hit by a car going at 40 miles an hour, they will be killed. We know that the BCP area has some of the worst cyclist and pedestrian rates across the entire country already. We agree with the BCP corporate strategy that we need infrastructure improvements for sustainable travel in line with your corporate strategy. Basically, we feel very strongly that we want a fairer allocation of the SIL pot, the Community Infrastructure Levy Fund, to reflect the deficiencies in infrastructure that have accrued over many years of lack of investment. Under a Freedom of Information request, I found that it was revealed that SIL receipts in BH13 totalled £6.8 million since 2013, and only £54,100 has been invested within that ward.
Can you finish up very soon, please?
Yeah, sorry. With regard to the Transforming Cities Fund, I was disappointed to see that the Camphor Cliffs ward is one of 4 wards out of 32 that is being missed out of benefiting from a potential £100 million central government investment to improve sustainable infrastructure, and I'd like to know why this area was not included. So to finish off, we really do want to discourage use of our roads as a rat run by the whole conurbation. We want safer roads. We want to protect the dignity of older people, who many are absolutely fearful of, walking to the shops, getting out of their cars, the community hubs of All Saints Church, people going to St Aldham's Church on Lindsay Road, frequently reports of near misses as they try to go to these social centres, which are actually vital means of alleviating social isolation. So I am concerned ultimately that if the council encourages walking and cycling in the in the BCP area, there will actually be more deaths and fatalities as a result of the lack of investment that has happened in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We haven't got any ward councillors left, have we? No. Okay, so Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much to the Branksome Park and Camford Cliffs Resident Association. A lot of work has gone into this. And I'd like to ask a question of your submission there. Have you actually involved your ward councillors, or because it's a question which I think has a bearing on application for SIL fund?
Yes, in reply to that, I have consulted May Haynes, who's fully supportive of the independent survey. In as far as the amount that was to be appealed for, Mohan Iyengar didn't reply at all to emails. When he has given advice, it has been concentrate on one location, you're more likely to get funding. Well, I'm absolutely not going to do that, because this is a problem across a very wide geographical area, and the high concentrations of elderly people mean, one crossing, or, people, young children getting cut out of cars to go to nursery. It's not possible to look at this in individual cases. The area needs to be looked at as a whole.
Once again, thank you very much for your presentation.
Okay.
You've done very well.
Thank you.
Councillor Rice.
Well, I would just like to say thank you very much as well. It's something that I personally feel very passionately about, in terms of people being able to get around safely and without fear of serious injury or death. I agree that it is a matter for the whole area, but it is indeed a matter for the whole of BCP. And so it's a big issue that we are really keen to try our hardest at improving. Yes, it's finding the funds, but we certainly want to prioritise it in general. And thank you for all of the input.
Thank you. Sorry, could I just ask, Mr. Baker, the statistics you gave the statistics for this area. Can you give us just the headline for the statistics for the whole of BCP? Is that an unfair question for you? Top of your head?
I haven't got them in front of me, but I am aware that over recent years has been reducing, the KSIs have been reducing, and we have currently the lowest level of KSIs we've ever been experiencing.
I was partly interested in the proportion in the BH13 area compared to the rest of the conurbation.
Well, evidenced by the map at the Appendix 7, you'll see that there is a scattering of hotspots across the conurbation. That doesn't show every accident, but you'll see that there is a big hole across many areas, including Branksome Park.
Councillor Trent, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I don't know whether this is actually going to involve the SIL committee that meets at the end of March, but I would have to declare an interest as I'm a member of the panel on that. And but as I say, it's my understanding that it's smaller community-based projects that were actually in the thing, which actually leads to a question, and I don't know whether Mr. Baker can answer the question, and that's that normally when there's the building of a sheltered accommodation and things like that, and there's been quite a lot of projects of elderly persons' dwellings of one sort or another in that area, If there's a perceived problem in the locality, surely isn't there still charged against that particular project? Because that area has got a hell of a lot of developments within it, and if there's a demonstrated need, has there been a charge made on it to try to sort out some of these problems, or is it something that should be being done?
So my understanding of that might be a section 106 rather than a SIL. If it's a direct consequence of a development, is that, I'm not sure which of you two might be best to give us an answer on.
Yeah, just to confirm, Andy's right. In terms of the direct impacts based on the development on the network, then it would be 106 or a number of other legal arrangements. So I'm not aware of any specific SIL-based element that would go towards something that was known. Obviously, the basic premise for development is to overcome and mitigate against issues if they're relevant to the impact of that development.
Can I just follow that up and say, is there actually enough being charged to provide for these things? Because if there is a lack of crossing facilities and things like that, the kind of developments that we are seeing in that area, I think there's a big McCarthy and Stone one that's currently in the offing at the moment, then surely these should be making a contribution towards making the road system safer, especially if they are catering for older people.
Thank you for that. Councillor Farquhar, did you show?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There was mention made to a freedom of information request, and for the particular ward, only £54,000 spent. There is obviously an impact on the change to the way that SIL will be apportioned from wards, which was agreed last week at full council, in that there would be a centralised pot. But my question is more of a technical one as regards, surely this wouldn't be for neighbourhood community part of the SIL, it'd be more for the strategic part of the SIL. So my question essentially, Chair, is at what point does the strategic side get unlocked to address concerns relating to pedestrian and cyclist safety, and which particular pot that it comes out, or what portion of the SIL fund it comes out of? So I'm not sure what officer could give us some guidance on that.
If I could just start, actually, because and there was reference made to the Transforming Cities Fund, which obviously we're bidding to central government for, and that's a significant amount of money, particularly looking at trying to encourage sustainable transport, walking, cycling and bus use. Although the actual routes don't go through this area, there are some of the measures that we will match fund out of our own funds, the local transport fund, are across the whole conurbation, so that there are some of the measures that will cover that. But perhaps you'd like to come in with a bit more detail.
Yeah, Councillor Farquhar, you're absolutely right. There is a neighbourhood element, a community-based one, which was mentioned by the speaker, and that is a bid process that a panel meets, and I need to express that I'm on that panel as well. So that's one element. The strategic element, based on the decision making that was made at council that you referred to, has a timescale for us as officers to come back with a strategic position in terms of that. That's a separate pot that is based on the level of development that happens, and that's for strategic elements. Now, if the council determines that there is a strategic need in terms of the transport infrastructure, then that would or could be on a list in terms of that allocation. But it's up against things like school need, it's up against other elements. Clearly the criteria used in terms of allocation of funds, of which everybody in the room probably agrees there is not enough, it has to be objective based on a set of criteria. And those criteria change and vary based on government policy. So government determine the local transport plan allocations to this area. It's largely based on the objective number of kilometres of road, amongst other things. And the TCF funding has a whole set of different criteria. We set off with a vision for the whole network as part of TCF bidding, and halfway through the process The civil servants that were guiding us through that process identified the need for us to provide different levels of funding in case it was oversubscribed. So we, in order to get any funding, we have to be compliant with central government to get that funding, and we've had to look at the corridors in terms of the comparative and relative need based on the criteria from government. That's why this area doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be missed out, but on this particular allocation of funding for TCF, it doesn't meet, as you quite rightly show, it's not part of one of the corridors. So we've had to cut it down, basically, for TCF. The local transport plan is the policy for this council, and that's being and will be refreshed. So the future depends upon that refresh of the process. Clearly, there are lots of areas that have elderly population, and that's very close to our minds in terms of officer proposals to the members. That's pretty much it, really.
Okay. So,
I'd like to make a recommendation, but perhaps there's others that wish to speak first, Chair.
I just wanted to also bring up what the resident was saying about the perception. I think the perception of danger on our roads. So at the moment we allocate funding for improvements based on injury rates, and that doesn't bear in mind, for example, an elderly resident never crossing a road because they have perceived it to be too dangerous, and therefore you never get an accident because they're never able to cross the road. So I would be particularly interested in how we develop that within our policies as a council. And I think, for example, Portsmouth Council worked with a research person to look at including that. So thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a complex issue, and I think we're all aware of that. In the last month, I've actually been approached by constituents in the Camford Cliffs area because I border onto it, particularly with reference to Lilliput Road, Haven Road, the Avenue, Camford Cliffs Road, which are long roads. In addition to that, I've been approached about Penhill Avenue, Sandycotts Road, Osmonds Roads, which are rapid cut-throughs. Also Bournemouth Road and Ashley Road. I do have some sympathy where there is a lack of crossing facility, particularly where there are schools that are relevant, shops, doctors, dentists and care homes, and we have got an ageing population. I think any solution needs a lot of consideration because a total solution is probably unaffordable and it needs to be evidence-based. There is no other option. Sill itself is not a bottomless pit. It does have a limited funding capability against a lot of projects. I think there are genuine needs, and we need to be very considered about where we invest in those needs, but equally I would add it surprises me, particularly in Camford Cliffs and one or two other shopping areas. Camford Cliffs at either end of the street does have crossing facility, but still elderly residents will attempt to walk across the road where it's convenient to them, not where it's safe to do so. And we cannot be accountable for every situation, but we do need to have a considered approach on the investment. It must be evidence-based in order to make or get the biggest bang for the buck, really. I'll say no more. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. I just make some comments because I cycled through this area on the way to Bournemouth Town Hall. And the perception thing is interesting because when you cycle, there are areas that you kind of drift through. You're not really conscious because you're aware they're safe, and that other areas you are just thinking that you could get mown down from behind. I think Western Road is one of those areas I feel that, partly because you have to, if you're turning right, you're hanging out in the middle of a wide road. And I think the design of it is possibly down to the fact that it's like a cruising road. So cars are going a bit over the speed limit. You could imagine that they are switched off to a degree, because it's a long sweeping road downhill one way. So yeah, it just that does feel unsafe to me. And I think if you perceive it to be unsafe, there is some element of unsafety there. And I think Tower Road West, I've raised this with the cycling officer, he doesn't seem to think it's a problem. But I think one day an unlucky cyclist going uphill is going to be mown down by an idiot going fast around the corner, which is a blind bend, and you can't, you're going at 0 miles an hour because it's a really steep hill. And then coming down, it's also dangerous because you inevitably pick up speed, and and there's parked cars down at the bottom and cars coming the other way. That feels dangerous. But I think we're in the territory, unfortunately, where because there's the lack of evidence, somebody almost does have to have a serious injury or die for something to be done, and that's completely the wrong way that it should work. But yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult one. I mean, I do very much sympathise with residents because there are issues here, but it is difficult to see how you would start addressing a lot of these.
So I guess that's ever the challenge for us as councillors is balancing all these requirements and trying to meet the greatest need. And I think Councillor O'Neill highlighted that. I think there are seeds of hope, and for me, I've been agitating particularly for walking cycling. I really welcome the work you've done in Branksome Park area, because it ties to areas like Manchester and others where walking and cycling has been given a much greater priority and actually given some serious money. And our bid for Transforming Cities Fund is to get serious money specifically around sustainable transport, around active travel, and that is about getting people for whom isolation actually, again, if you're not afraid to go to the shops, then you're probably becoming more housebound, and that's a real problem in terms of mental health and well-being and all sorts of other impacts as well. So it's far more than just enabling pedestrians to be able to walk the streets happily. It's enabling them to socialise and be a part of the local area, and I think that's really important. How we manage to measure that and weigh it against areas, and boundary roundabouts a good one. Well, it's not a good one. Boundary roundabouts up by the university, there are quite a few deaths, which is why we're spending a lot of money on trying to sort out boundary roundabout. And that's the difficulty our officers are working with, because they are, if they are presented with a serious death or serious injury record, that has to be where the money goes based on the amount of money that we have available right now. But we're bidding for more specifically around these sorts of areas, and likewise there are various bus funds that just come available nationally. We unfortunately are in a position where we have to bid for all this money. We don't actually get by right a lot of the funds, and that makes life a bit difficult. I think the still is an interesting area in terms of being able to look at community initiated work. But it is a limited pot, and again, I'm involved in that group looking at those. So it'd be wrong to me to say anything about the specific bid into that pot. But it's something that we will come again at. And as Councillor Farquhar said, the rest of the conurbation is actually probably falling more into line with Poole. So we're moving away from ward-based allocations based on there are some areas where there's just no development, but there's equally significant need. So we will have to work with that. Okay, so we have a recommendation to acknowledge the concerns, to liaise with the Dorset Roads Traffic Policing Unit in terms of speed enforcement, and they have the variable speed cameras, which are quite helpful in terms of highlighting behaviour, to look at assessing options to enhance pedestrian and cycling facilities in the area, but we haven't yet got funding for that. And obviously that we will be looking at the SIL bids in the next month. Sorry, Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I fully support the recommendations which are laid out by the officers in the report here. With the evidence which has been produced, and again, my thanks to the Residents Association, because they are the individuals which are on the ground. What I come back to is the demographic, and that, to Councillor Rice's point, that feeling of safety, and also to the residents, whereby we don't necessarily want to miss out on near misses just to get the fatality count up or the serious collision. I would like to add to the recommendation is that the ward councillors work closely with the neighbourhood group, because there is a sill fund pot which will dry up for the ward as of the 1st of October, to my understanding. No. The individual ward.
No.
Ward
That's in the
pot's still
Bournemouth.
available.
That's in the Bournemouth area. This is in
Only
Poole.
Bournemouth. All right. So this is Poole. Right. I withdraw my recommendation.
Sorry, just for members of the public, we've obviously bringing the three councils together. In Bournemouth, they used to have an allocation per ward, and in Poole, the current system, which will change in October to one system across the whole of BCP, but the current system has been an allocation which is shared across all wards, and then community groups bid into that with the support of their ward councillors. But Councillor Farquhar is from the Boscombe area and familiar with the Bournemouth system, so that's that. Okay, thank you.
Just to finally say that over the last probably at least 6 years, I have been in correspondence with the Transportation Department and been told that you need to apply for SIL. So, having looked at the SIL application form several years ago, I was put off because I found it overwhelmingly demanding of detail. It's partly why I joined the Branksome Park and Camphor Cliffs Association, but fortunately nobody could really kind of shed any light on how to fill out the form. So, the general gist of what we're aiming at is that our area has been, seriously underfunded over at least, more than a decade. Just in terms of crossings, the speeding and speed enforcement issues. So this SIL request is not something that I've just come up with. I've been actually told over several years to apply for it. So it's an accumulation of time and desperate need. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry that the SIL application form is difficult. I think what we tried to do, and certainly in recent times, is to make it easy for community groups. So clearly we need to do some more work maybe on that, but that's something we need to, certainly for the community portion of SIL, it's something that we were attempting to make reasonably straightforward.
But just to follow up on that point, maybe perhaps after we finish with this one, I could have a word with you about where you found, or on another day, where you found it difficult, because that will help with us streamlining things. But I would add that within the Poole area, over £2 million has been allocated to a vast variety of different projects, all based on the community coming forward. So it's worth persevering with our forms. Is my message.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd just like to round that off. So in terms of the recommendations as laid out before us, is everyone in agreement with those? Go with that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your input. As I say, it is valued. It is certainly, as you said, the values of the council are to try and move forward, particularly on supporting sustainable travel, and we have to find a way to do that in all parts of the conurbation, including definitely in Branksome Park. Thank you. Yeah, so we take 5 minutes. That's probably not a bad idea. Thank you. Okay, if we can reconvene, please, as soon as you're replenished.
10 years is the answer.
Okay, thank you very much. So if we can crack on then, please, with item 8. We have some officers to talk to us around. Simon, I don't know if you'd like to introduce yourself to members.
My name's Simon Philp. I'm currently the Highways Design Team Leader.
My name's Chris Parks. I'm Traffic Management Team Leader.
Okay, so the first one of these, item 8A, this is recommendations around a series of traffic regulation orders. Do you want to just talk about this?
Thank you. This is a report for the recommendation of the advertisement of these traffic regulation orders, which support various schemes which are part of the local transport plan, active travel and safety measures projects. So the proposals cover a number of schemes, and they cover traffic waiting restrictions, moving orders in relation to speed, and traffic calming.
Thank you, that's great. And we need to take them one by one. Anyone would like to speak on any of these? Okay, that sounds easy. Yep.
I can just make a point on item 2, Talbot Drive. There is a reduction in the amount of parking available on that, but it's actually adjacent to a football stroke cricket pitch that has quite regular matches, and all round that area is covered in traffic restrictions of one sort or another. And whilst I can understand why the extended no parking is being proposed, I do wonder whether there ought to be consideration of relaxing a short length of it nearby to make it possible for people who turn up for matches, because basically you wouldn't get a football team parked there, let alone anyone who's looking at it, or a cricket team or whatever. And so I do sort of just wonder whether it's just taking another 1 or 2 spaces out and putting problems on the nearby roads that.
So this is 3 meters, half a car length.
Well, one car, I would
One
say,
car, okay.
but yeah, it just puts a little bit more pressure on the available space next to a sports pitch.
I think Simon's zooming in on the design. So this is the end of the new cycleway, isn't it? Along Wallaston Road. Welcome to talk on it, Simon.
Oh man, I'll get you. Okay, so this is the reduction by 3 metres of the existing parking bays. It's to provide a safe access for cyclists who have travelled along Wallaston Road to enter Talbot Drive, to get to the Mossley Road quiet route for cyclists who choose not to carry along the main road. It's to allow us to have a build-out that allows a cyclist rejoining the carriageway to see around the parked cars before re-entering the carriageway. So the new path comes along here, turns into Talbot Drive if you choose not to carry along Wallaston Road. There's parking currently to the end of this build-out, and this 3 metre section just enables the cyclist to see around those parked cars before turning into Talbot Drive. And as we said, the parking space, 3 metres, would be approximately half a vehicle in terms of parking.
Was there another restricted space nearby that you were thinking would compensate, Tony?
Well, that I'm not sure, but we've got another issue later on about anti-idling outside schools, and you've got parking space there, which people do park up, dropping the kids off. I kind of think all of these things are going to interact with each other and sort of cause additional problems. But as I say, I'd have to look at it carefully to see where the possibility lies. But you are putting pressure on an area where there's a school further down, and weighting restrictions to prevent them blocking up residential roads nearby. And you've also got the sports pitch, and I just feel that that's just a little bit more pressure being added on the limited amount of parking available.
If it is so desired, as this is a permission to proceed with the advert, we have yet to actually raise any orders. We could look at extending the bay the other end by 3 metres, or seeing if there are any other bays on the same length of road we could extend by the same. It is unlikely to necessarily create a whole new parking space, but we could review and see if there's an opportunity to gain another space on that link if wished.
Well, I guess it's unrestricted in Mosley Road, isn't it? Although you can't get in from this end, you could get in from the other end. So if you were attending a football match, you could park in Mosley Road as well.
I don't know Mosley Road.
You've got a school time.
So if we could look at that, but no promises, I think is what it's suggesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I use that junction quite a lot, and I was hoping that there would be a change to that particular aspect of the cyclists being able to get onto the cycle path. So I'm very pleased to see that. Just in terms of, I've often experienced if there's going to be a dropped curb, then for cyclists to be able to get up, to have as much dropped curve as possible. Taking my trailer with 2 kids behind me, like the angle that you can get onto a pavement is not great, and so having increased amount of dropped curb is useful. Are we talking just about that one, or are we talking about any of them? Because I also have a question for number 6, which is the Heathlands Primary Spring Water Close. Just the installation of a raised junction to slow vehicle speeds. I don't know what the detail of how steep the angle of coming onto that junction is going to be, but with suspension now on vehicles, I've noticed that a lot of vehicles don't need to slow for a lot of the speed bumps that have historically been put in. So I'd just be interested to know how steep that can be, and for that to be prioritised, so that we do actually slow vehicle speeds.
Off the top of my head, I believe the maximum in the order is 1 in 12, but we would normally aim for approximately 1 in 15 on a non-bus route and around 1 in 20 on a bus route. And we are limited to generally a maximum height of about 75 millimetres of the hump, which is...
So 1 in 12 is steeper than 1 in 20, sorry.
1 in 12 is steeper than 1 in 20. On bus routes, it is a more gradual ramp to ensure comfort for bus users.
Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. Every day which I learn something new is a good day as far as I'm concerned, so if you'll indulge me. It's relating to item 3, the notification of the TROs. I read here the 3-week public consultation by notice in the Bournemouth Daily Echo, on the council's website, and on-street notices. My question is this: at what point do the on-street notices go up? Is it after we do the recommendations, or at what point?
So there is a process for all TROs, and the notices go up on street at the start of the public consultation. Sometimes they go up a day or 2 before, so that the officers can get round and actually put the notices up. But they are put up at the start of the 21-day public consultation.
So my question is that, does that start, Chair, after the Cabinet approves them, if we put the recommendation that they approve the TROs?
Sorry, yes, it does. So after the After the Cabinet approval for us to advertise, there is a short process for us to get that in order, in place, and newspaper lead-in time. But yes, after the Cabinet approve recommendation to advertise, then the street notices go up as part of the public consultation.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. I've learned something new.
Just back to the Heathlands Primary and looking at the crossroads. So the whole crossroads is to be raised. Is there any opportunity for, well, I don't know whether it needs it, but zebras on those, or to put, obviously it increases the price quite a lot. I don't know, is that definitely the safest thing that we can be doing for the cost of raising the whole crossroads.
I'm just going to ask Steve to step up, who is leading on that project. He knows more details than I do.
Yeah, hello, councillors. This is a project that is on our Safer Routes to School programme, and basically the idea of this is has come from us as officers. Initially, it came from a request from the school for improvements to improve safety to get children back to school and back home again. And the main idea of this is to slow the traffic down on Springwater Road. We haven't considered zebras as yet because zebras would increase the cost quite substantially, and we feel that by installing a raised feature it would improve safety enough and encourage people to walk and cycle to school more than it not being there.
Can I just ask, do we have any crossing patrols for this school in this locality?
I don't believe we have one at this location, but I can check that.
Can I also just clarify, if, for example, zebras do not need the extensive infrastructure that they need at the moment, in the years to come, for example, if we can just paint white lines on the road, the way that we're building this wouldn't exclude us from putting zebras on that, I assume.
And at the moment, we have to abide by the regulations that we have, and we do need to install balises at the moment, so we would have to allow for that cost.
But in
But
answer,
if we were just building it, and then in a few years' time we
it
could
could facilitate the width around the radius, could probably facilitate, and we can look into that in our design, detailed design, before we issue the order, that there will be width on that, on an approach that a zebra could be fitted in if appropriate. We would need to assess the suitability and safety of that before we allowed for it, but potentially we could widen the area of the hump to accommodate a future zebra.
Thank you. I guess this ties back to the previous bit, because Manchester are looking very actively at just painting the white bits, aren't they, to make a much lower cost zebra crossing. Yes, obviously they'll come back to us if there are any objections raised, then we'll see these again. Thank you. Item 8B, which is disabled bays. So this is similarly items to go out for advert.
Yes, this is the next batch of disabled bays which require a traffic regulation order for us to implement. The applications all meet the criteria, the current criteria, and this is just ask for approval to to start the advertising process. So then, the same as the traffic order process for the other one, it would go out to public consultation, which includes councillors, emergency services, etc.
Councillor Trent.
Looking at the first one, you know, it's talking about at the moment there's a 24-hour street park in place for the disabled and it's going to be removed. Is that because the person who applied for it and is using it no longer needs it? Just to clarify that that is what's happening.
I do apologise, I don't seem to have the form in front of me. So, Aylesbury Road, yes, currently the space is street parking place for cars and motorcycles, and this will be replaced with a 24-hour parking bay for the permit holder.
Well, Fortescue Road is being removed. Is that being removed because it's no longer being used?
Sorry, Fortescue Road, yes, that is removal of, yeah, exactly, yes, removal of disabled bay that's no longer needed.
Sorry, just back to the first one. Randolph Road is where the street parking currently is, but the disabled bay is actually on a road that doesn't otherwise have parking, by the look of this.
Sorry, yeah, you are correct in that, yes. Yes, The disabled bay for Aylesbury Road is, yes, is unrestricted location, currently unrestricted.
Are we content to recommend these to go to Cabinet for advertising? Any more comments, questions? You're looking puzzled, Councillor Farquhar.
Sorry, I mean, thank you very much, Chair. I didn't quite understand. I'm less puzzled now.
Thank you. Okay, are we happy with those then to go to Cabinet as stands? Thank you. So on to item 9, which is anti-idling outside schools.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm John McVeigh, Sustainable Transport and Policy Manager. This report sets out a proposal to develop, in partnership with Public Health Dorset, an anti-idling campaign to be initially run with a small number of primary schools across the BCP Council area. It will include a toolkit linked to the national curriculum to be used by teachers and children to encourage parents to switch off their engines whilst waiting in the vicinity of schools. According to Public Health England, air pollution is the biggest environmental threat to health in the UK, with between 28,000 and 36,000 deaths a year attributed to long-term exposure. In fact, the Royal College of Physicians estimate a higher number, with 40,000 deaths linked to air pollution, with engine idling as a contributing factor. The school run alone is responsible for generating 500,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. The real challenge is to reduce or even remove school journeys by car, and schemes to address this will be brought to future meetings of this group. This report, however, is concerned with reducing the impact of the school run on air quality close to schools and using residual DEFRA funding in a permitted way. Members are asked to support the recommendation to Cabinet for the anti-idling campaign to be undertaken at a small number of primary schools, with a view to rolling it out across all of the BCP Council area afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the recommendations, I mean, I'm curious as regards the toolkit, but can the officer clarify a little bit about recommendation B, where appropriate enforcement action is to be used but as a last resort? How is that actually measured? How is that defined? How does that tie in with the pilot scheme and the toolkit itself, education of parents and the like? I'd like a little bit more clarification on recommendation B.
Just to say that the Road Traffic Vehicle Emissions Fixed Penalty England regulations of 2002 do permit local authorities to issue fixed penalty notices for motorists, when asked to do so, have not switched off their engines. So we are permitted in law to do that. Unfortunately, it's only a £20 fixed penalty notice fine, although I understand the government are working on increasing that. What we're saying here is that could be used if required. We're very much hoping that the education of parents via their children and the teachers will be sufficient to reduce this problem, rather than having to resort to that fixed penalty notice action. There are authorities around the country, particularly in London, that do issue fixed penalty notices for idling motorists, and that is something we would certainly consider if our behavioural change campaign didn't succeed.
May I follow up, Chair? Thank you very much for that reply. The reason I question it is because I think there needs to be some more clarity as regards who's going to be those marshallers, etc. And in another place, we've had incidents outside schools whereby marshallers have been abused for carrying out their particular function. So there's a note of caution as regards the enforcement section, as regards it has to be something which needs to be perhaps driven by the school, so whatever marshals that they have in place to control the traffic or to actually highlight the change of behaviour that you're looking for is actually led in another place, e.g. another committee I set on to incidents whereby there has been aggressive behaviour from the drivers.
So would we be expecting to be traffic wardens, or would it actually be people associated with the school that would be enforcing?
Chairman, yes. Haven't actually got specific plans for this yet, but I would envisage that it would be our civil enforcement officers that would be asked to enforce rather than... in fact, it has to be a local authority enforcement anyway, so we couldn't ask the schools to do that on our behalf.
The report makes clear that's the last resort, and I think I'd refer to paragraph 10, which is, the measures to reduce the cars being there at all is far more what I'd like to see us moving to, and I appreciate this is dedicated money for a specific purpose, but I think there's something about how we encourage people to walk, scoot or cycle to school, whether with or without their parents, as being preferable to turning off the engine when they get there.
Yeah, on that top. No, I was just wondering whether within the information that you're providing, you could add in some information about the carbon footprint of different forms of transportation, just to start the educational aspect of sort of, so that people understand the carbon footprint of moving by car compared with walking, cycling, bus. Maybe a useful opportunity.
Yes, are you asking for a modification to the recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that, or do we want to just restate what change we'd like to see? So do we want a D, which is about using the opportunity to reinforce the carbon impact of different modes of transport?
Yeah, that sounds good.
If I may, before you do that, can I just check with recommendation C whether that's meant to be rolled out to additional schools or to all schools within the across the BCP area? I mean, all state schools as opposed to all schools, obviously.
Yes, Chairman. I think the proposal would be to roll out to all primary schools across the BCP area. Obviously we would need to ensure the schools were engaged with us on that, and some will be more willing to talk to us than others. And equally, there are some schools that are very much higher up the ranking, needing this this action than others. So there'd obviously be a prioritisation. Yes, I envisage it would cover all primary schools across the area.
Thank you. I was just wondering if the wording around C could be tightened up a little bit to show that.
Councillor Neil.
My own clarity, I mean, the exercise in itself seems very worthwhile, and I do understand the impact of exhaust fumes on young bodies, but it does appear to me at the moment like a nice exercise to do, but with no teeth on enforcement. And I somewhat pick up on what Councillor Farquhar was saying. It's the exercise is one thing, but the enforcement is the thing that makes it become a policy or a practice. And there was the mention of traffic wardens perhaps being the enforcement officers in due course. And yet whenever I've spoken to council about parking issues requiring enforcement, I'm told that we really haven't got enough traffic wardens across the BCP geography to meet current demands. Are we setting ourselves up for a problem and a failure, or can we follow through on this exercise so it becomes a practiced reality? Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you. In terms of our enforcement officers, I don't know if we've got a comment that we could make about that.
Yes, we're reviewing them. There's a strategic car parking review, and that will include full review of the operational elements of parking. If there is and generally speaking, CEOs, as we call them, I think it's, enforcement officers, generate income more over and above their salary, but to a point. So there are difficulties sometimes in terms of recruitment and getting the right people. It's a really tricky job. So sometimes we do have shortages, but the intent this year is to review the whole process, all of the parking regime, and also the operations. So we should be fit for purpose moving forwards into the future. And if this is part of the policy, if this is agreed through Cabinet, then we need to resource it. Yeah. Most of this, most school runs and school areas are generally close by to parking enforcement routes. So I wouldn't expect it to take much more time, depending on the amount of idling that's happening.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Rice, back to you. So, you're suggesting an amendment, and I appreciate we then rambled on with a couple of other things. I'll come back to you in a minute. So, do I have a seconder for your proposed change, or do you want to talk about something else first?
Well, I was just going to say that with regards to the anti-idling with the primary schools particularly, the kids themselves are very useful at making parents feel guilty and also observing other parents, for example. So I just wanted to highlight that. But yes, would I be able to get a seconder for my proposal about carbon footprint?
Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to have a little bit of debate on the recommendation before we move it to a vote. Is that I see in the risk assessment, paragraph 45, just to expand on the recommendation for the CO2, there was a figure of tons of pollutants, idling engines, etc., which is recommended. The reputational risk of not being able to evidence the improvement of the air quality funding. So there needs to be somewhere in the mechanism to say, because I'm very broadly supportive. I was watching a news report from on a local Southern News up Oxford, whereby one of our primary schools in that area has a gold standard for their environmental involvement, and I'm very broadly supportive of the fact that it's the schools that have shown an interest in supporting their children are top of the food chain as regards what schools it gets rolled out into. So from the council's perspective, then that's great. But I think for not only the figures of the CO2 for the different types of transportation, the actual measurement, they actually say, well, if we had monitoring equipment, etc., that could actually show an improvement outside those schools, then that's something which you could actually support its further rollout, because those schools have, one, initiated it, two, they've got something measurable, and three, when it goes on to further school rollout, then to Councillor Rice's point, is that you've got that footprint and how it's been reduced. So I just wanted to have a little bit of discussion around that recommendation there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I think it is part of the journey in terms of if we're showing areas that are particularly high in pollution, then we need to be going to the next measure, which is about encouraging transport by other methods to get it further. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to 45, it seems to me that what we need to do, particularly if we're going to measure the success or otherwise of any of these measures, is to actually have monitoring outside schools as of standard. And I think the point was just made that, you know, there was a school where there was a particular high level of air pollution, and that should be prioritised for, you know, rolling different measures out. And I would have thought it because we have to have them in certain places anyway. You know, I think there are certain hotspots where there are pollution monitors. I'm pretty certain that they could be linked electronically quite easily now and possibly powered from, you know, an adjacent lamppost or something. And I'm wondering whether we ought to perhaps have a target of installing monitors near schools as a matter of course, and then using that as evidence to back up these measures, because without that, you know, it's sort of, you know, it's very difficult to actually measure the success or otherwise what we're doing.
So I'll come to Councillor Howell in just a minute, but so part of this with public health, I thought they were actually installing some devices, and this was the residual money that was left over after that. Is that correct?
Yes, Chairman. As we say in the report, some of the money has already been used to purchase a number of real-time air quality monitors. We're moving a little bit away from transport here, and it's more my environmental protection colleagues that I would need to talk to about the feasibility of installing this equipment outside schools, but I'm very happy to do so.
And I'm also conscious it falls into the smart cities bit in terms of some of that monitoring capability. Councillor Howell.
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on from Councillor Rice's point. I think given the actual abilities to fine are quite limited, it seems that the embarrassment is probably the best way forward. So I wonder what the law is about putting stickers on cars. I would have thought that if they were, the glue was not, you know, harmful to the car, we could put and hand out stickers saying, "I'm an idol!" exclamation mark, asterisk, etc. Or something like that, and just and say when you're walking past one of these people, you just slap it on the car, and then it will annoy them and embarrass them, and be legal, possibly. So.
Chairman, I'm not sure about the legality of that, but what I can say is there are resources available, and the RAC, I understand, supply them. There's various signage available for putting up outside schools to get the message across, which will hopefully help rather than having to resort to putting stickers on cars.
You could turn.
You know, I find it's a half.
I think that kind of comes back to the conflict point that Councillor Farquhar raised, and it might be easier to turn it around to stickers that say I'm caring for the planet. I'm turning my engine off when I'm idle, and have the kids give those to the parents, and you know, that's part of the messaging. Might be to use stickers, but in the reverse way that you suggested, which then they can choose to put on their cars to show how good they are.
Yeah.
Well, or responsibilities. It's all about rights, isn't it, and not responsibilities. So are we comfortable to take the 4 recommendations in, because we've got an extra recommendation from Councillor Rice. Are we happy to recommend that to Council? Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Okay. So I'm conscious that you guys have been waiting for quite a while. I think you've got a very short presentation. I'm very happy to see it if you're happy to give it, because I think it'll be useful to other members. So members, this is for information. It's obviously a really important set of projects that have been undertaken with the support of the LEP.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name's Gary Powell. For those that don't know me, I'm the Head of Engineering. And my colleague to the left here, I'll let you introduce yourself, Steve. Well, you've already done it once, I think.
Yeah, so my name's Stephen Hoyle. I'm a team leader in the Sustainable Design team.
Okay, so the report is a general update with regards to the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership Programme. As members are probably aware, within the sort of Bournemouth and, within the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area, the growth deal through the LEP has been generally utilised for two main transport programmes. The Bournemouth International Growth Programme, or the BIG programme, and the Port of Poole programme. The report provides an update on the various projects that are ongoing within these programmes. Let's go. In terms of the Port of Poole programme, this consists of 6 transport schemes to improve access into and around the Port of Poole. As illustrated, sorry you can't see that very well, the majority of those have been completed and are on time to budget. The ongoing part of this programme is really around the townside access schemes. These comprise of major access improvements to the Port of Poole on the town side of the Blackwater Channel and the new development sites. They commenced in November 2017 and they are due to be completed on programme by March 2020. Again, I'm sorry, it's not very easy to see those, but the stage 3, which is in progress, is completion of all the remaining interjunction enhancements scheme-wide, including further packages of work on West Street, which are currently on site, Poole Bridge Approach and the southern end of West Quay Road. In terms of the Bournemouth International Growth Programme, this is a programme of improving connectivity and easing congestion, protecting existing jobs and creating new ones in and around Bournemouth Airport and Wessex Fields. Again, as illustrated, a number of the schemes have been completed. They include the A338 reconstruction, which is number 1 on the illustration there. The Blackwater East Junction and A338 widening, Chapel Gate improvements and the Herne Roundabout improvements. In terms of Blackwater Junction and the A338 widening, the primary aim of this scheme is to improve the journey times and reliability through this historically quite congested interchange, and also provision of safer and more reliable journeys in turn to provide more efficient access. The scheme in effect comprises of 3 key elements. The East Junction, which was completed in the summer of 2018, the West Junction, which is what is currently on site, and the improvements to the A338 slip road, which were again completed in the spring of 2019. This is an illustration of what's currently being built on site. It's the final element of the scheme, it's currently underway. It's due to be completed this coming spring. It mirrors the improvements that have happened on Blackwater East and include a new on-slip to the A338 in the northbound direction, again improving capacity through the junction. In terms of Wessex Fields, as members will be aware, the scheme was reviewed by the Cabinet on the 30th of September and a public consultation was organised in January 2020. Some of the works that commenced at the same time as the Blackwater Auxiliary Lane and widening and slip road improvements, and this was to enable the impact of traffic using the A338 to be minimised by utilising the same lane closures. These works included the slip road improvements onto the Cooper Dean, which are shown here, which were widening on the verge side but also in the centre lane to create an additional lane, and also would serve the new junction that is currently being developed on the Wessex Fields site. Let's go on to that. So following approval by Cabinet on the 30th of September, work commenced on the new junction, which comprises a roundabout from the slip roads with a junction to the Wessex Water Treatment Works. The extension spine road, which will be constructed to the boundary of the development site, and this then can feed into the new development once the future of this has been decided. Works on the new roundabout are ongoing, and the extension of the Spine Road is due to commence late spring, early summer. This is interlinked with improvement works that Wessex Water are also undertaking, which is new siphons to the site. And in effect, we have to, once we've built the roundabout, we then have to wait for them to come in and start the siphon works, and then we will continue after them with the Spine Road. And that should be completed late summer, early autumn. I'll just move on to Boundary Roundabout, and I'll hand over to Steve.
So Boundary Roundabout is at the east end of Wallace Down Road, which is a key link between Bournemouth and Poole. And it's also adjacent to Bournemouth University and the Arts University Bournemouth. There's approximately 24,000 vehicles a day that use Wallace Down Road and Boundary Roundabout, 7,000 pedestrians and 1,500 cyclists. And at present there's very poor facilities for pedestrians and cyclists, and there's a very poor collision record at Boundary Roundabout. In the last 6 years, there's been 37 collisions, resulting in 40 casualties at Boundary Roundabout and on Talbot Avenue. And at the roundabout itself, there's been 22 collisions resulting in 22 casualties, 77% of which are cyclists, 95% of which involve what we call vulnerable road users, which are cyclists, pedestrians or motorcyclists. Now, the Boundary Roundabout project will improve safety and reduce collisions and casualties. It will provide enhanced and improved facilities for pedestrians and cyclists, and we're looking to improve the bus stops and the bus waiting facilities as well. We're also installing a tree replacement programme where we're going to install more trees than we've removed, and we're also doing wildflower planting around the roundabout on the additional areas that we've got in green there and within the roundabout itself. Works are due to commence in spring, and we are looking at a construction period of approximately 10 to 12 months. This will be confirmed following the tender and the procurement process. We are looking to phase the construction to minimise the impact on all road users as much as possible, and we're looking at modelling our traffic management options at the moment to determine what the impacts on the users will be during construction. And we are going to work with the contractor to try and extend our working times and include weekends to try and reduce our construction time as much as possible. We will also ensure that residents have access throughout construction and that we provide safe, usable routes for pedestrians and cyclists throughout the works as well. We are going to ensure that we regularly update the public and inform them about the particular works and diversions potentially that might be on during the works. And we're also going to have weekly meetings with the bus companies and Bournemouth University to ensure that they're regularly updated about what's going on, and so they can speak to us about any problems and issues that they may have.
Thank you.
And as you told me when we talked about this, I think yesterday, the first part of that works, you're trying to link in with the resurfacing to the west of here to minimise the cumulative delay. Anyone like to ask any questions? Councillor Farquhar.
It relates to, not unsurprisingly, the Boundary roundabout. A couple of things which occurred to me is what consideration is being given to alternative routes, because as you say it's a main thoroughfare between the two elements of the conurbation. But I picked up on the regular updating to the public. What updating has been so far, particularly relating to the felling of the trees, and what sort of feedback or impact have you had from either the lack of that updating or perhaps the or the need for further information?
We held an extensive consultation event back in 2018 where we letter dropped a number of properties in the area and also went out via social media and via the council website to inform people about our consultation, and we had nearly 3,000 responses to that consultation. About 450, I believe, were from local residents within the area. There's about 2,000 from other members of the public throughout the area, and we held face-to-face interviews both at Wallisdown Crossroads and at Bournemouth University to get feedback from different people using the area. So we did hold an extensive consultation event. As far as the tree removal is concerned, we did send out a press release informing people about the works before we did it. We did as well do an extensive optioneering exercise throughout the design process, and please let me assure you that we've not taken the removal of any trees lightly. The project that we've actually favoured or that has come across as the most beneficial does have more benefits, additional benefits, and we are, as I say, doing a tree replacement programme to ensure that we do install more trees than we removed, and that we're going to plant around the roundabout as well. We have had some complaints which I have responded to. So we have responded to some complaints. There's about 6 or 7 that I've had.
Thank you, Chair. I think a response of 3,000 is absolutely phenomenal, but also a very clear indication of the concern for that major route and that particular roundabout. And I'd just like to thank the officers for that consultation, which seemed to have gone above and beyond with the face-to-face and responding promptly to residents and others' concerns as regards the loss of trees.
Thank you. I fear some of the pain is still ahead of us in terms of the work that's going to be done over the next year, but thank you for that.
Yeah, could you just explain what the cycling accidents, were they concentrated on one particular arm of the roundabout, and how do you expect that, how has it been improved?
I'll just show you where they are. Basically, there's a couple of sites. There's one here, and there's one here, and there's a smaller one here. The long and the short of it is the collisions on the roundabout that involve cyclists are vehicles failing to give way to cyclists that are already on the roundabout, which is unfortunately common at roundabouts. So a cyclist will be on the roundabout trying to get to their destination, a vehicle won't see them and will basically drive into them. What we're doing here is we are narrowing the lane widths, we're narrowing the entry and exit angles of the roundabout. So that will force vehicles to slow down and make positive turns onto and off the roundabout. The lanes on the roundabout itself will be narrower. All of this slowing vehicles down as they negotiate the roundabout itself will improve safety.
Thank you.
I was really pleased to hear that you're going to keep walking and cycling access open throughout the works. I just think it would be worthwhile investing in advertising that and also putting to the public and just putting the basics out because often people aren't aware. So having sort of a radius around this roundabout, sort of a 15-minute walking distance and a 30-minute walking distance, and the same for cycling. Just people really aren't aware of the distances that they could actually switch to cycling, and also just linking that in with Beryl and that facility, which I know we're doing for the Wallisdown works.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I was just going to say that for Wallisdown works, we are looking at linking in with Beryl, and there'll be some communication coming out about that very soon. But we'll be doing the same sort of thing for Boundary Roundabout.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Farquhar.
Sorry, Chair, I may have missed it, but I did also ask as regards what consideration for alternative routes, which may be communicated to people.
Is this alternative routes within the works or?
Past the works over the 12-month period.
Diversion routes.
Yes, we will post out information about diversion routes as well, so that people know where they have to go if a road is closed for a certain period of time.
Can I ask Councillor Farquhar, possibly hasn't seen a copy of that. There was a slideshow you showed which actually showed the route. It might be helpful to him to have a copy of that as possible.
Yep, no worries. We can send you the presentation that we did last week, and I can also send you a copy of our proposed diversion drawing if you would like to see that.
I'll explain this. Thank you, Graham.
I mean, I just.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I just say, Chair, and we are currently, as we stated, we are currently looking at the traffic management options available, and we'll be working with the contractor once that process, the tendering process, has been completed. the aim would be to try and maintain traffic through the site as much as possible. And as Steve has already said, the works will be phased in order to try and do so. We do recognise that this is a major route in the conurbation, and we will try and maintain the route as much as possible during the works.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, that was just for information, that one, so we're finished with that, thank you. The next meeting of this committee is the 1st of April, and the forward plan has 3 items on it. At the moment, traffic regulation orders, which is a standing item, electric vehicle supply, and a petition around Hillview School in Red Hill. Councillor Sabul.
Can I give my apologies for that meeting in advance? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Councillor Farquhar.
Sorry, Chair. I'll probably talk to you more about this offline, but for the forward plan, I sit on a licensing committee, and it's come to light that on Friday we'll be consulting with private and hackney associations, is that in the town centre itself that there is a road closure at a certain time of the night at the bottom of the Old Christchurch Road in the cumulative effect area. In that meeting, I'm drawing on the officer to actually consider putting taxi marshallers in to allow taxis to get into that particular area so that they can remove the users of the nightclubs swiftly to what it is just now, because at the moment you've got a great mass of people. So I'm not sure this is the arena where we might want to be discussing that, or we might want to be discussing it elsewhere.
Thank you. I mean, that was an area that was pedestrianised in the evenings to support the nighttime economy, so it's an interesting one in terms of reintroducing taxis to that. I don't know. Yes, okay, so if you'd like to take it offline, then perhaps we can chase that through. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. That's grand. And thank you, officers, for staying. I'm sorry, we were running quite late for you.